G'day everyone. And time lapses are really cool and they're not that difficult to capture. Today, I'm going to give you the information you need to take some fantastic time lapses. I'm going to take some time lapses specifically of my plants. Let's start with this avocado tree. I'm just going to readjust this light, focus the camera, and begin. What is a time lapse? A time lapse is a way of taking video. It's where we take a picture at a set interval and then we play it back much faster. It allows us to watch changes that happen slowly, or at least too slow for us to observe in real time. I love taking time lapses. I think there's a real beauty in watching something change slowly over time, and time lapses allow us to do that. I have taken time lapses over the course of hours, days, months, and even a year. So I've learnt a few things and I'd love to share them with you to help you to make your own time lapses, even without a lot of equipment and equipment that you've already got. I'm going to be thinking more specifically about plant time lapses today, but the principles that we're going to talk about can be transferred to any kind of time lapse that you are taking. So let's begin. Of course, the first thing you're going to need when capturing a time lapse is a camera. And you can buy purpose-built time-lapse cameras. They're generally pretty expensive and you actually probably don't need one. I'm going to guess that you already have the technology that you need to take a time-lapse. For all of the time-lapses that I captured and all the ones that you've seen on this channel that I have captured myself, I have just used an iPhone. When my wife and I upgrade our phones every couple of years, we hold on to our old ones and they make really good time-lapse cameras. The iPhone actually has a built-in time-lapse feature. If you go to camera, there is an option to take time lapses just built into the camera natively, which is a really great way to kind of just get your feet wet for the first time with time lapses. It doesn't have any of the customizable features which you might be wanting, but it's a really handy way to just get started. For my time lapses, I use an app called Skyflow. Now, Skyflow is a really powerful time lapse app. It has a really simple interface, but it has a lot of customizable options. If you want to be able to adjust things like capture rate, so how often a photo is taken, and at the end, once you finish the time lapse, the playback rate, or how fast it plays back. You can set it for timers so that it starts after a certain time or it finishes after a certain time. And you can do a bunch more other things like light, all sorts of things. It's a great app. I pay for the full version. It wasn't very expensive, but the free version is also great. It's got lots of features. The camera is probably the biggest obstacle for you in capturing time lapses. But if you have an old iPhone lying around, or your current phone, if it's a shorter time lapse and you don't need to use your phone for a period of time, you've got the camera that you need. You can use Android phones as well. I don't have an Android, I've never been an Android person, so I don't have any recommendations, but there are plenty of apps out there for Androids to capture time lapses as well. So if you don't have an iPhone, that's not an obstacle either. Now, once you've organized your camera, the biggest obstacle really is out of the way, but there are a few more tools which are really important and are going to take your time lapses to the next level. The first one that you really need is a tripod. Now, tripods, you can get them pretty expensively at camera shops, or you can go online, which is what I did. I bought this one for $12 on eBay, and it does the job. It's a phone tripod. You just clip it in there. It doesn't go very tall, but it does the job beautifully. The one behind me that I have set up is just a Gorilla Grip camera. Again, not very expensive. That was about $25 from an actual store. What the tripod's going to do is it allows the camera to be stationary, which is really important for time lapses. If there is movement, or if the camera moves, the picture is not going to be smooth, it's going to be jolty, and it's going to be really awkward to watch back. Now, there are certain things that you can do in post-editing, but you want to be able to capture the best time-lapse you can, and you want to do that with a tripod. If your time-lapse goes for more than a couple of hours, you're going to need a source of power. Camera features are pretty heavy on battery usage for phones and cameras, and so you need to be prepared to have it running for a long time, and so it's going to need something to power it. Now, if you're doing one indoors, You can generally just plug it in. If you've got an extension lead or a longer charger, that works really well. If you're outside and you don't have access to a power point, I recommend using a battery pack. That's going to just guarantee that your camera is going to have enough power to last the entirety of your capture, because you really don't want to get to the end of taking a several hour long time lapse and realize that there was a problem with saving it because it ran out of battery. That's just heartbreaking. I've been there, and you want to make sure that you're powering it. Once you've got your camera, your tripod and your cameras plugged in, you're almost set. There are a couple other things to consider though. Lighting is a factor that you need to consider. Cameras can only capture light, and so if there's not enough light, there's not going to be a lot to capture. It's going to be very dark, it might be silhouetted, and it's not going to make for a good time lapse. And if your time lapse goes for more than one day, and you've set your camera up and it's all going well, but you don't have anything to light it overnight, you're going to have massive patches of your time lapse which are in darkness. Now you could chop them out, but then you're going to have this jittery, jagged light change, and plants move overnight often. And so it's going to be in a different spot. You really don't want to do that. So you want to have something that can light it for the entirety of the time lapse. If it is a plant or something that's not a sunset that you're capturing. For the time lapse that I set up here, I used one of my soft boxes. Now, this is just what I have on hand. I have a few soft boxes which I use for making videos, but I don't expect everybody to have one of those. For my 5 months avocado time lapse, I just used a cheap desk lamp for the lighting source, and it did the job beautifully. As you can see, the light changed over the course of the day, but it really wasn't a problem because the subject of the avocado tree was always lit by that desk lamp. And when it was nighttime, as you can see, when the wall goes black, you can still see the avocado really clearly because it is lit. I recommend using LED bulbs for this kind of thing, just because you don't want to use too much power because you've got a light on all the time. But at the end of the day, I encourage you to use what you have on hand. This doesn't have to be an expensive project, and make sure that the light is illuminating the subject and not shining into the camera, because then you get weird challenges. And in fact, I'm not actually filming in a very good spot because the light behind me is doing weird things and I've had to close the blinds because it was just doing strange things, but that's okay. That's really all you need to take some really good time lapses, all the tools that you need. There are a few other things that you can do, and things that you can think about to really make your time lapses pop. The first is the background or the backdrop. To really see what's happening to the subject that's changing, you want to be considering what's happening behind it. Is it really busy? Is it changing often? Is it too well lit? These are things you need to consider. Often, simple is good, but not essential. For a lot of my time lapses where I'm featuring a plant and how it changes, I am having it on a fairly blank backdrop, often a wall, so that you can really not be distracted by what's going on behind the subject of your time lapse. But backdrops are something that you can experiment with. It's fun to see what else is going on in the environment around it. So it's something to experiment with, have some fun with. There's no real right or wrong way to do this, but you probably don't want to detract from your subject. You also need to consider the area that your time lapse is set up in. If you're using a tripod with a camera, if you're using lights, it takes up space, and you want to be considering the other users of that space. The humans and animals that might be in that area, which might find your time-lapse equipment challenging. You might just want to be considerate of them. But also, there are certain things which might get bumped. You know, this is on a table, which is not the best spot for a time lapse, and I certainly wouldn't have to do it long term, but because I'm just doing a couple of short ones, I think I can get away with it. But you still need to consider, things that might happen during the time lapse. Are there animals that might bump cameras or get into frame? These are things to think about. Making sure that your time lapse isn't going to get disturbed is something to consider when you're setting up the area for it. Let's talk about capture rate. So capture rate is how often a photo is taken. For the time lapses that you've seen in this video from this table, I've taken a photo every 15 seconds. The faster or the more frequent you take a photo, the smoother the time lapse is going to be. And of course, the less frequent it is, the less smooth it's going to be. Does that mean that you should just do the fastest settings you can? Well, probably not. Otherwise, we would just take a normal video and then speed it up later in editing. Especially for longer term time lapses, you really need to be thinking about the data, the storage that your time lapse is taking up. Cameras have only got so much storage and you need to be working within that. If it's too big, well, you're going to run out of space. It's going to stop your time lapse before you want it to finish. The more frequently you take photos, the faster your storage is going to fill up. You can also adjust things like the resolution, but ultimately, if you're capturing at a really quick rate, it's going to fill up your storage much more quickly. There are some guides available on the internet, but it really depends on a number of things with your particular camera. So I'm not going to share those details just here, but you really need to experiment with how long it's going to take you to fill up your storage card. Play around with it and be prepared to run out of storage. Experiment with what you can do. It's okay to make mistakes. We're all learning to do this. Have fun with it. There are some other fun things that you can do with your time lapses around the passing of time. And because we speed up the change so much, it's hard to get a sense of how much time has actually passed. And a fun thing that you can do to really anchor the time lapse in an amount of time is to set it alongside something which we can kind of predict. Now, I'm just talking about a clock. I've used a little alarm clock on occasion to really just give a sense of how much time has passed in a time lapse. But you can also use other things like candles. If you're able to supervise it burning, never leave a candle unsupervised. That's very dangerous, especially if you've got fire near your plants. But things to consider, things to experiment with. And depending on how you plan to share your time lapse, you might want to change the orientation of it. For all of my time lapses, which I plan to share on YouTube, I shoot them in a landscape view, like this video is here. But if you're more likely to share it on a mobile sharing platform such as Instagram or TikTok, you know, as a reel or as a TikTok or whatever other social media platform which is generally viewed on a phone, you might want to shoot it in portrait mode. That's absolutely fine, but it's better to think about that before you start your time lapse. Now, I'd like to chat briefly about two time lapses in particular that I have on this channel. And I have more than just these two time lapses within videos, but there's two videos currently on this YouTube channel that are dedicated to a time lapse, which I've learned from, and I'd love to share my reflections because I think it might help you. The first one I'd like to talk about was the 1 year avocado time lapse. Now, my idea was that I would capture one image a day and play it back. And I did that. And I wasn't super impressed with the end results. As we talked about earlier in the video, how often you capture a photo will dictate how smooth the playback is going to be. And taking a photo every 86,400 seconds will not make it very smooth. And so in that video, yes, we saw it grow and you can see it grow, but it's not as smooth as I would have liked. And because I only had one image a day, I only had, 365 photos over the course of a year, which makes for, well, not a very long time lapse. Playing it back, I didn't really have many options. I couldn't make it much longer than it was because I only played it back at 15 frames a second, which extended it a little bit, but any slower than that, which I really didn't want to do in the first place, would have just made it even more jolty and less smooth. The other time lapse I'd like to talk about briefly is actually probably one of my favorite videos on this channel. That was my 5-month avocado time lapse. And I just really like this video. So the avocado tree grew much faster than in the 1 year avocado video, but the main reason why it's so different is because I took a photo every 5 minutes instead of once a day, which is still a fairly slow capture rate. If you're capturing a flower opening or a leaf unfurling, you're going to be much faster than that. But for the course of 5 months, it took over 42,000 photos and we ended up with a really lovely smooth video. You could see how the tree moved and changed during a day, which was just a delight. Another thing that I did differently with this one is that I changed the angle every few days. So I actually stopped the time lapse, I backed up the video that I had taken, or the time lapse that I had taken, and I moved it to a slightly different position. It just makes it a lot more dynamic. And if you're doing a long-term time lapse like this over the course of weeks or months, I would recommend thinking about changing the angle every few days or so, because it just makes it much more interesting for your audience. I could have just set it up in one spot for 5 months, and it would have been a 5-minute long video of an avocado tree growing, but it's not as interesting as if you move it every few days. You can focus on different things that are happening, that you're noticing with the changes, and it just makes it a lot more interesting to watch. And with that, I'll finish the video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you feel equipped to take your own time lapses now and to use the things that you already have to help you out with that. I wanted to make taking time lapses as accessible as I could by helping you use the tools that you might already have to do so. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love to know in the comments below, and with that like button. If you haven't already subscribed to Scott Grows an Avocado Tree, please consider doing so for more avocado related content and plant things, and occasionally something a little bit different like this. And if you do make any time lapses and you put them on Instagram, please do feel free to tag me. I'd love to see them at Scott Grows an Avocado Tree. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.
Scott grows an avocado tree. Scott grows an avocado tree. Scott grows an avocado tree. Scott grows an avocado tree.